Oh,
Safi, the tape is recording.
Okay, everybody. Hi. It's Safi and Marco, dish out on the movies.
Said 1, 2, 3, go. That's not like a bedtime story.
Marco, I was yawning.
Go ahead, Safi.
Okay, well, I thought you stopped the recording.
No, I press go and I go.
Oh, wow. Okay.
1, 2, 3, go. Not 1, 2, 3, snooze.
Okay, let's keep going. We are doing the last episode of the Watergate Plumbers.
What? That's not the title of the show.
The White House Plumbers.
God, Safi.
Meaning the people who were part of the big Watergate scandal back in the 70s and mainly E. Howard Hunt and Gordon Liddy. But it was everybody, including President Nixon, who seems like out of all the people who were convicted, in the end, he was the only one who didn't get in trouble. Except he was big enough to resign and accept it, which that would have helped in other situations later on in the universe. So anyway.
I thought that this episode, surprisingly, I did not think it was as good as it could have been. I thought that next to episode 2, this is probably the weakest episode of the show. You know,
why is that?
Episode 3 was so good. Episode 4 was even better. This was a big step back, and I think a big factor in that is how rushed everything was. Like there were a lot of sequences where I felt like they easily could have made this into like 3 episodes with all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
And they just like would really quickly get through stuff. Like the Cliff Notes really fast. 1, 2, 3. Like there's this part where Howard Hunt comes into the courtroom and then Jim McCord says he needs to talk to him, and then the judge comes in and they don't even show Howard Hunt going back to his seat or going to his seat in the courtroom. Like he just teleports there. And it's like, details like that, stuff like that just made it feel really rushed, where like they didn't let things breathe.
Well,
I
watched it twice. I watched it twice, and I think you're right. I just accepted it because it felt like that's all the episodes they were allowed to have. But this case was there were so many layers to it. I know they have their own layer, the White House Plumbers, but I mean they're called the White House Plumbers for a reason, and there's so many levels and layers and parts, and they just kind of skip through them, like the tapes, for example. They say the tapes. He made tapes. Oh, did you know that he was asking me all these questions, says John Dean, who is the lawyer, the White House lawyer. I guess he's the Don McGahn. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm just not, all these titles and how it compares to today and who has them, and I felt like he was asking me things so I would incriminate myself. And then I find out he has tapes. And it's just like, there was a lot to those tapes. And a lot of stuff, and they kind of glossed over that.
Yeah, they glossed over a lot of stuff.
Well, like that's just one thing.
They're like, chunk. It's like, what if you had a freezer full of ice creams and you were only allowed to try one little spoonful of each ice cream? Instead of, what if you're not allowed to eat one ice cream, you have to just have the little spoonful for each one. Like that's the equivalent of this episode. It's like, you can't just have one like with the last episode. It's like, no. Spoonful of mint chocolate chip, spoonful of Rocky Road, spoonful of peaches and cream, and it doesn't really add up to make a great episode. I would just say it was okay. It was a big step back, in my opinion.
Well, it's just because, they had their 5 episode and they had to squeeze all of this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
they did put in the end that it was flashes, and they did put the number of all, I think it was 57 people were put in prison and died it. There's just so much. And they didn't even put the list of who all that was.
And they did the exact same thing that I knew that they would do.
What's that?
Well, remember I said I'd like to see, after this stuff, I'd like to see, what happens to them in the future. And a little bit of, afterwards. And no, instead of that, they did exactly what I thought, where you'd have it at the end. They both have gotten their sentences, and then they have the little captions on the screen. I didn't really want that. I wanted to just see, a couple more minutes of the show.
Well, what they did was they did Liddy and Hunt, and in the long distant future, it seems like it said Liddy was on an episode of Miami Vice, and what was really shocking, which I had no idea about, was that President Carter, had pardoned Liddy, which
is very strange.
I would like to read about that. I'm going to have to pick that up in the paper because I never knew that.
I mean, I think that it is good since, E. Howard Hunt got 2.5 years. So if he got that amount, I think that Liddy only should have gotten a little bit over double, which is basically what he got. So I did think that they both had probably good enough sentencing. And then Nixon should have gotten more than that.
And Nixon didn't get anything. He just was allowed to resign. I guess the biggest mystery for me, and at least, was the fact that the little boy, Hunt's son, this man comes and says, "Okay, I'm taking you away." And I thought it was this guy who had a suit and he had this foreign accent.
He was in Breaking Bad.
Oh,
remember?
No, I don't.
Oh.
And then, but then it was the guy in the car. It was Miami Con almost. And he had the accent and was very flamboyant. And the other guy either was the lawyer or driver. I'm not even sure.
And that was one of the pretty bizarre subplots. Remember talking about how is the whole family thing going to pay off? It kind of payoffs in 2 ways, but the whole thing with, they show a scene where this guy tells the kid, I'm going to be your godfather, and we're going to have lots of fun and adventures, and it's going to be very fun. And it was really weird, it was played off for comedy, and
I thought it wasn't real. I thought he was joking.
Yeah.
And then when he came to get him, and he is their grandfather. He's the girl
godfather.
And him, and that the father had told him to come take him, and I was just shocked. When you read about E. Howard Hunt, at least what I've read, just in the little that I've read, I was actually looking for what he said about Dallas. But anyway, I'm talking the family stuff, and of course the thing about his wife. There's another thing I wanted to bring that up too. But anyway, this is a boy. I wanted to talk about just a little bit.
A boy?
Their little boy. Is that true? I know it says that they.
And he's it's time for our little adventure.
It just mentions. What it does? It just mentions Saint. Their son Saint. That's the only one. In fact, they talk about
Saint John.
Yeah, Saint John. They mention him at the end with his father and talking about Dallas. And, I mean, that's in real, what I've read for real.
I think
these other children, these 2 daughters, and I'm did they exist? Did this little boy exist?
I think that St. John was the one who was in the conspiracy theory episode with Jesse Ventura. So.
Oh, really? Yeah, I think you're right.
He looked a lot different, but I remembered the name. So, I mean, the episode really rushes through the wife's death, too. Like, it starts off and, they have the whole funeral. And, a lot of the episode, though, is really just focused on
prison.
Gordon and Howard.
And falling out.
Which one of them is going to talk, if either of them. But they start off with the funeral, and it just zooms by. Like, they just zoom past, like, oh, she was killed, she was murdered. And, they pointed out a couple of things that were suspicious about it, but...
There's a lot to that. A lot.
They really could have gone more into detail with that, because that was a big event, and it just felt like... It was more like, okay, we have to move on, but, it's impacting the characters off screen, so... And it's like, I think it's better to have things on screen.
Well,
so,
they did, it's just like they brought up what happened in bits and pieces.
Yeah.
That's why I also had read about it before. God, there's a lot to that, too. Tons and tons to it. I didn't even, and some of the stuff he said, now, I don't know, so I'm going to have to read more about it. Like, her plane was diverted at the last minute. What does that mean, it was diverted? And then the thing about who came first to the scene. He says it's usually the firemen, but it was the FBI, though. They were the ones who came first. And so it was like, that was suspicious. That wasn't even, of course, I read it really fast. But there's a lot to that. And I only knew about it because it was a busy time in my life, but it was my mom and dad, it was like, this was like really front page news, and everybody's talking about it, and at least people who care about that. But I mean, this is at a time you don't have all these informational sources that we do now, and so you're just dependent on what you have, the 3 or 4 channels you have on TV, the newspaper, and radio. And so this was a big deal. And plus, the other thing is, I know she had to have kept a ledger, because they just went on and on about it. And I don't know, I didn't read anything about that yet. But she had this ledger, and then she had it in a hat box in the closet. He got it out, he looked at it, so he knew what it was. I had all these names and dates. She was looked like she was very meticulous, which I could see that. And he gave it to his blonde-headed daughter, which she's not even mentioned.
The blonde daughter. Like, that's what you should just call her.
Well, I don't know what to say.
The blonde daughter, because it's like she's just there, then she's not.
Yeah, well, I know that. And so I'm like, she and the other girl and the little boy are not even mentioned when you look up his name.
Yeah.
Which I don't understand. So did they even exist? Because they do mention Saint. That's the only one they mention. Like, they only have one son, which is really kind of hard to believe. And so, but they say that, he gives it to her, and he says, I can't destroy it. I can't acknowledge it that I gave it to you. I can't.
He basically wanted to do the same thing with his other son, but with the ledger with her. So he was basically giving it to her to destroy.
Right, and she didn't do it.
Yeah.
And she said if he didn't, she was pissed, and she said if you don't tell she said they killed our mother, and she said if you don't tell them what happened and who's really responsible for all this, then I'm going to turn it in myself.
Yeah, because like I really didn't think, like, I thought, like, why would Howard not tell after that happened? Like, that would be the last straw. Like, instead of making you not talk, that would make you do the opposite. It would make you be like, oh, well, wait until you hear about this in the newspaper. 6-hour confession. 6-hour confession by E. Howard Hunt.
And the way they showed it, at least, like I said, I watched it a couple times to try to pick up these details. I thought I just didn't pick it up. I did pick up a couple that he had a stroke in prison, which I didn't read that either. And of course, they said they made up some stuff, so I don't know what they made up.
Yeah, that's something that happens with these shows and movies, is that once you hear we dramatize things and we made stuff up, you don't know what to believe and what not to believe. Because it's like it all blends together, because they have to make a complete picture. They have to put everything together.
Well, as complete a picture as they can.
Well, it's their complete picture. Like, this was their narrative. You have two guys, one of them might talk, and the other one will never talk.
That's another thing I could talk about for a little bit. But anyway, they show her... in fact, that's when he had a stroke. He was in the hospital or their clinic or whatever you want to call it. And she tells him. That's when she tells him. And then you see him. He's going in to testify. And you hear what he has to say. He's very general. And he doesn't really, at least when we saw him, he doesn't really get into specifics.
Yeah, his testimony was just another thing that was kind of like brushed over. Like, it was like at the end, and the point was that he was doing it, not what he was saying when doing it.
Yeah, but it looked like the daughter wasn't happy. And so she still had the ledger. At least from our information or what we were able to
Well, the daughter
see.
never looked happy. She had that same facial expression the whole episode.
Well, yeah. Well, how can you blame her? I mean, they lost their mother, and then they all find out that it's all suspicious, and because everybody's talking about it. I mean, they're not immune from what's on the news. They're not immune for the Watergate hearings. You see the kids watching the hearings. And then Liddy, I thought it was so funny. He thinks he's being such a patriot by not talking. But then his wife says, "What's the matter with me? And why are you not wanting to, if you have the chance to be able to get out sooner, why aren't you taking it so we won't be apart?" I thought that was so sweet. And I don't know if that ever happened, but I mean, that was like, that's true. That's very basic.
He's just sitting there like, sorry.
Yeah, I got to be a good little soldier for Nixon, who did not pardon him. A Democratic president pardoned him.
And you come to find out that apparently Nixon wanted to blame the whole thing on him.
Yeah.
Because he knew that he wouldn't care.
Yeah. And that's what John Dean told him. And another thing, back then, I probably said this before, he said John Dean, when this was all happening, that he was very depressed and that he almost was going to kill himself. And he watched an episode. This is kind of, when you hear about little stories associated with certain Christmas movies. He saw It's a Wonderful Life, and I guess it was the first time, and inspired him because, remember, he's going to kill himself too. And he decided not to do it, to just keep going on and everything would work out. And you couldn't tell that from that show at all, because it was like, he was like a rock star. People were asking for his autograph, and he was the big, I can remember him testifying. He was like the big guest of honor because he was the White House lawyer, I believe, like Don McGahn, if you have a front, like, during the whatever administration, if you want a cross comparison. In fact, I don't even know who the White House lawyer is right now. But anyway,
your mom.
This one is the one who took copious notes, and but anyway, I'm not going to say more about that. But anyway,
I thought that
that's a cross comparison.
I thought that, like, the episode was okay. Like, it wasn't bad, but it was just like, it was everything that I would have feared that the show would be, considering it was only 5 episodes, and that, it felt like time ran out on them, and it didn't feel like
Yeah.
They just finished it. Like it felt like okay, we're done. Bye bye.
Wish they would have done at least one more episode, because that was 5, right?
Yeah.
5 episodes. That's not even the standard 6. It's an uneven number.
And it just kind of felt like they were very just focused on the 2 people and which one of them talks, and that's it. Like, Howard Hunt eventually talks by the end. He's fed up. He has like a character arc a little bit.
And they said he had a stroke, too.
Well, that's one little thing that happened.
Well, in fact, he sure was in great shape after that for having a stroke. I didn't get that either. That's the thing. I want to look that up. I'm going to think of all these questions. I'm going to Google every single one of them.
You're going to Google them?
I'm going to Google them. So, yeah, I just hate that. But I still, they did do a, the 2 guys, Woody Harrelson and,
oh, now you're going to forget his name.
I know.
After
Jennifer Aniston's boyfriend.
Why don't you just call him Jennifer Aniston?
No, I'll just call him E. Gordon Liddy.
Gordon Liddy?
Whatever.
You
Liddy.
mean E. Howard?
Gordon Liddy. Gordon Liddy. Sorry.
Fuck.
Yeah, but anyway, you know that part where he has the stroke, he keels over. They don't know he had a stroke. They just know he passed out. They couldn't wake him up. And he picks him up. Well, they would prank each other they like to prank each other on the set all the time. And that they put weights. They put weights in Hunt's and Woody Harrelson's clothing. So when he went to pick him up, he could hardly do it. He had to he struggled a lot. And then he found out, and then he took all the weights. He had quite a few weights in his clothing.
Well, anyways, back to the episode.
Yeah.
Back to the show.
That was behind the scenes.
It was funny seeing G. Gordon Liddy in prison somewhat. You know, the stuff that he did. He helped this Jewish prisoner get a kosher meal instead of, the regular ones. And then he helped several prisoners with their appeals, I guess, which that was pretty hilarious because he was like, there were several black inmates who gave me their things to help them, and it turns out that a lot of them were completely wrongly convicted. And I thought that was a funny little like social like commentary jab. Like they just put that in there. That was really funny. Like all out of nowhere, he's like, it just so happened that, like, there were lots of wrong convictions.
Well, it's amazing to some people that when you look at the face of it, there was this one guy who was just talking about, they talk about the Manhattan area where they've done this thing for who, and that this Japanese person came and was a visitor of one of the lawyers or somebody, I don't know, and he saw dozens and dozens of people come in and be tried, and they did whatever to them or didn't do to them, but that they were just being there to show, to arraign them or whatever. And all he saw were black people. And he said, where are the trials for the white people? And so that's, it's just like people find out things when they have the first class one-on-one dealings, and they see what's going on, and they're a little bit surprised. So Marco stepped out of the room for just a minute, but anyway, I thought it was a well done series. It's just a shame they had to rush. If they'd had one more episode, and of course this was on a holiday, but it would have, I think it would have helped them and served them better to have at least one more episode. Because if you watch any other series, I think they usually have 6 minimum.
Yeah.
So,
And it was still an okay episode. Like, there's just not very much to say. Like, everything that you kind of thought would happen happened. And that was that.
yeah. But, it's, you gotta wonder why, and that was another thing. I didn't see all these talk shows because I don't watch them, but where these two appear. But I'd like to know why they decided to do this series, because Woody Harrelson, it's Justin Thoreau or whatever the other guy's name, but they just decide, this would be interesting. We can play these characters. Like, they're like the producers of the show. And so you got to wonder how they came up with the idea to do it, of these two guys. And I just thought it was really good that they did that, because, it's funny, because, that's when I was in, like, junior, senior high school into college, and it feels like it happened yesterday, but it really happened. A lot of these people are dead. Even all the newscasters who they showed presenting these news clips, they're all dead except Dan Rather. Dan Rather's still alive. Daniel Shore, all those people, they're dead. And John Sirica, there was a lot about him too, because I think he's the one that didn't mess around in one of those tapes and made him give up those tapes. And then the thing with the tapes, there's this missing part, and everybody's always surmised or tried to figure out what's on the missing part. That's what I said. There's so many layers to this case that, and it's important, and it's interesting too.
But in my opinion, they still could have done more with this. They still could have had a couple more episodes, because it just felt like it felt like a very fast forwarded, like you're watching a movie and you just press fast forward to the end,
and then boom. That's why I had to go back. I didn't even know what happened to him. I didn't know he had a stroke. I didn't hear that, because the daughter is the one who told him that she was there to visit him, the blonde daughter, and she said, "Dad, you've had a stroke." And that was all that was said about it. So I didn't even know. That's what I'm saying. I wonder if that was true.
They kind of said afterwards, they did a little funny joke where Gordon said that he wrote him a new exercise and diet routine or regimen, and I thought that was funny.
Yeah, because he was in great shape.
Yeah,
you could tell he worked out.
It seems like he's just his character never changed. Like, he still remained how he was, but I kind of have a hard time believing that, because later on in his life he didn't really seem like the same character. So that's why I was saying it would have been nice to see afterwards as well.
Well, I saw him interviewed on an early David Letterman show.
Yeah, you already said that last episode.
Anyway,
you already talked about that.
He had changed in some certain ways. He was still kind of the same, he had the same beliefs, but he was willing to sit down with somebody with complete opposite beliefs and have a debate.
So I would give the episode a B plus or a B even. I'll give it a B because I thought that, last episode was way better. Last episode before that was way better. Episode 2 was like, they're kind of on the same level. But then episode 1 was way better. So this was really like a step down overall.
Yeah, I just agree with Marco.
A B?
Yeah, because of all these things, I had to re-watch it just to understand, like the little boy, how he just disappears off the radar to go, and then the mystery is, I look E. Howard Hunt up and all they talk about is Saint. And like, were there other kids? And if there were, why aren't they mentioned? So I just don't get it. I mean, Liddy, if you look him up, they do talk about all the other kids and how they were a very close-knit family and very community-minded. And
another thing was, like, I guess the message of, like, even though E. Howard Hunt did the right thing, they didn't really show him getting a big reward over it. Like, they didn't really show him getting a big, like, celebration or anything. They didn't show...
No, they're... Who?
What?
Who's celebrating? His family?
Well,
or
just anything. It just seemed like he didn't really get very much in return for doing that in terms of... But then Gordon, he got a lot of great things. He got all the prisoners on his side, like Better Cal Sal, and his wife still loves him, and she's not going to sleep with some random guy because he's away from her for 5 hours, you know, like the other wife in the series.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like it was weird because, like, Gordon benefited a lot, and then Howard really didn't.
No.
I guess maybe because he still hasn't said the truth about JFK.
Yeah.
At that point. So it was like he was still being quiet about something.
Yeah. And I could understand it if he was. But then at the end, and they said and they put this on there, that he may have confessed the assassination to, I don't know.
Yes, Safi, we already talked about that a million times.
I know
You've
that.
seen it before.
But that's what they wrote on there, too.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Safi.
Okay, so who knows?
No, we literally talked about it.
Okay, Marco. So anyway, if you like this, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like the whole series, what'd you think of the series? Did you learn anything new? And what would you have liked to heard more about? And do you agree with us that they rushed the last episode? And you notice that we haven't really said anything about, like, the titles, because it just didn't seem to mean much of anything. So
well, the title of this episode was True Believers.
Yeah, okay, now I get that. Okay, well, anyway, so if you'd like to become one of our subscribers, you're more than welcome. And we like to get input, but we also like to hear what you have to say about things, too. And especially about this. Do you think Woody Harrelson and Justin Theroux did a really good job? I thought they really did. I thought they played the characters really well. And if you're familiar at all with the case, like, did you think that any of the other people who played, like, say, the guy who played John Dean, I didn't think he was like him at all. And the looks, he had red hair and glasses, and McCord and all these people. Did you think that they did a good job, or they were reminded you of them? So, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.